When you can see my screen.
I can see your screen.
Perfect. So we're going to talk about the most exciting thing that you've spent all day on, sales tax, and the simplification of it within the context of Acumatica. So first of all, I am Ronnie Fritz. I'm a senior solutions engineer at the company. I've been here for over 20 years, so essentially since the company was incepted. And have had lots of experience and opportunities to deal with our clients. So have the opportunity today to deal with the webinar, and really happy to be here to be able to explain something about our company and about the way that we function within the context of Acumatica. So we've been in business since 2004. We're a global company with 23 offices, and we have over 4,400 employees. The number is north of 5,000 now, just as of recently. And to give you an idea of the scale of our operations, we serve over 30,000 customers across 95 countries. And in 2021, processed, so these are the numbers that were prior to us becoming privatized by Vista Equities. We did 33.9 billion tax calculations in 2021. We've managed over 30 million documents, and we process over 4.1 million tax returns per year. As far as our finances are concerned, since 2018, we've grown 37% year over year. And as of 2021, our annual revenue was around $800 million. And in other words, I mean, we're a strong growing company, like many are in the overall environment. And our resources continue to invest really heavily in our products and services to support our business goals and essentially your business goals as well. In terms of our architecture, in terms of the market, the products and services that we offer, we start with our core products, which are exemption certificates, tax calculation, tax returns and reporting, and now e-invoicing and live reporting. So if you've never heard of that, it's probably because you don't do a lot of business internationally where that's a requirement, but that is also a part of our core offering in our products. We support those products as well with further compliance related products because our clients need compliance across the board in all kinds of areas. So we also have supporting products in licenses and registration, a tax research product, an item classification product, again, typically for international products and HS classification, cross-border, in other words, tariff duty related kinds of products, 1099 and W9, and a property tax component as well with regard to our products. In addition to that, obviously, we have to have a way of, I'm going to say, delivering those products and the capability of those products to our clients. We do that through integrations and our APIs. So we have integrations to many different ERP and accounting systems, CRM systems, e-commerce, marketplace organizations, point of sale companies, billing and payments, and APIs directly into custom interfaces, which actually is a huge component of our overall business. And then as well, we offer professional services and multiple different types of professional services with regard to Streamline sales tax, which is something that you may or may not have heard of, and I won't get into great detail on it, but it's something that saves you a tremendous amount of money and simplifies your processes amazingly in terms of the sales tax world that you're typically facing. We do sales tax risk assessments. We do full implementations as well, and training and support of not only our clients, but also our partners like Acumatica, like the partners for Acumatica, in terms of what it is that we do. The last part of this is just showing you which of these services are offered as well as what we call managed services. And what that means is that we will actually automate that service entirely in the background on your behalf through the support of staff and directly managed groups that perform services with respect to those particular kinds of products. So in terms of the Acumatica and Avalara integration, the integration is created essentially by Acumatica itself. They create Avalara in terms of what we are inside of your Acumatica environment as a tax agency and a tax provider. There are tax categories connected to inventory management. Tax details for multiple documents are received. They commit the taxes on final invoices and payments. And that commitment process means that we have the information in our system for the purposes of reporting and returns. And then through that, we're able to manage complete audit trail of all sales and use tax accruals. We do all of your tax reporting, um, tax compliance, and both terms of the integrations, right? And provide all of the information that you need with regard to exemption certificate management as well within the context of Acumatica, which is a recent addition with regard to how we function within Acumatica. And from there, I'm going to jump into our demonstration. So you should be looking at Acumatica itself. And we'll start here in terms of a little bit high level, and then we'll drill into some of the things that we're doing inside of the system. So first and foremost, we talk about like that we're already actually inside of the system with regard to how it is that we function. So the integration efforts that are involved are very, very light because we're written into Acumatica by Acumatica. We become a tax provider. Essentially, all that's involved in terms of turning on the system is going to the tax provider screen, selecting us, putting in your account and license key information, in other words, your credentials from your Avalara account, and that turns on your ability to be connected. What that means is that all of your transactions will then be communicated to our service portal, and we do the calculations in terms of your whatever it is you have on your documents and push back the answers into Acumatica itself. The functionality that you see is underneath the skin in many sort of circumstances. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at specifically a couple of clients and the way that we change the client management aspect within the system as well. So we're going to look at, first of all, a client that is an exempt client. So many, manufacturers and distributors have to deal with exemption certificates and the management of those certificates now in today's world. Ever since Wayfair has come around, Wayfair has introduced this concept, as many of you probably know, about economic nexus and having thresholds in different states of different amounts that when you exceed that threshold, you automatically cede nexus into that state, and then you're required to start to collect sales taxes. So the obvious sort of corollary to that is you might not have ever charged sales taxes in that state because you're dealing business with resellers or with government organizations or essentially entities that are exempt. And so even though you would be declaring nexus, you wouldn't be collecting any sales tax because your clients are exempt. Unfortunately, what this process has all done and created is the requirement to start to collect the exemption certificates in all of those states where you now have nexus, whereas before you didn't have to. So essentially that means that your exempt client management has become far more important, and it is for an auditor the low-hanging fruit in the equation when they come for an audit. So essentially what we have done and what Acumatica has done within the context of our product is given you the ability to make a client exempt in our system by creating them inside of the ECM provider. ECM provider means Exemption Certificate Management Provider, and that's us. That means that you're communicating the details of this client to us, and in particular the client ID and the places where you are shipping to them, the states that you're shipping to them in. You can then, once you've created that exempt client within Acumatica, and this might be a brand new client, you can then request their exemption certificate directly through our interface by this connection that Acumatica has written in their interface. So you're able to basically provide an email to the client, request the certificate with a specific template, request the certificate for a specific state and for a specific reason. Pressing that basically triggers an event inside of our software to send that client an exemption certificate request. When they get that request and basically fill it in, you're also able to see that here in this section for retrieving the request. And this shows you the status of the client, So if you're just wondering if they have an exemption certificate already and what the status of that exemption certificate is, you can see all of that status right here. This is a window into our system. And if you want, you can actually pick up and grab the actual exemption certificate, pull it into view for you to review for whatever purposes you have internally. So very straightforward way of client by client management with regard to any kind of new clients that you have that are exempt and making sure that you can manage their exemption certificate profile overall, and then also making them exempt with regard to any kind of transactions that you're doing. So that's a key thing that has been put inside of the customer space. I should actually just mention the other part that is really important in what occurs within your customers is that we become the tax schedule, like the tax identifier for your company, with regard to all of your shipping locations. So in other words, we replace the tax zone that you create with this word Avalara. What does that do? I mean, a lot of people think that's really not very exciting, but what that does is completely replace the requirement to create a tax zone and maintain a tax zone by you or someone in your company. Because that's the key thing that basically associates for this client what the jurisdictions are that are going to be pinged for their transactions, right? And even if they're exempt, what jurisdictions you're going to report to in terms of those exempt sales. So really important, but once that is in there, that word Avalara, you never need to maintain that client's tax zones ever again. And any additional shipping location that you have for them, once that's inside, it's basically a default in the system, you never go through that process again either. In terms of your actual what you see out of a resulting sales order, and this process that I'm going to go through is identical for sales orders, quotes, and invoices, credit returns, and on your AP documents, like accounts payable, vendor bill documents. So we're going to use the famous bartending company here for a quick transaction. And all we're going to do is really quickly order a computer. And we're also going to add an additional line item here for software as a service because it's taxed differently in the jurisdiction that we're selling it to here. So this is exactly what you would be doing normally on a document. I mean, if you're using project billing, the project bill actually they're attached to the sales order and invoicing engine beneath the surface in terms of how they will react with our system. So you have the same basic functionality out of those sections of Acumatica, out of those components of Acumatica as you do in sales order and in invoicing. As you know, to get any kind of results on any of this, all I have to do is save the document. When I save the document, it basically goes out to our service, calculates the ramifications of this particular sales order, and then inserts the final information into the system. So essentially what we did there was look at all the particulars of that document and then calculate what the results are of this particular document. So we're shipping this to Denver, Colorado, right? And the resulting tax rate jurisdictions include the state, county, city, and two special tax rate jurisdictions. Right? You'd never have been able to get those jurisdictions correct in any other way other than the way that Avalara functions with respect to that. And we also show you for the overall document what the taxable amount was, right? And what was essentially not taxable is, when you take a look at the details, this software as a service. We know that because in terms of your implementation, your products have an identifier on them that tells us what they are, and then we know how to tax them in terms of every single jurisdiction in North America and actually globally now too. So in other words, so if I make this software as a service component be sold to Washington, it's completely taxable. California, it's not taxable. Texas, it's 80% taxable. All that behavior is automatic below the surface on your behalf in terms of how that functions within Acumatica. Okay. If this is an invoice, and it's not, but if this is an invoice, essentially that information that we saw is inside of our system within the transaction section, and I've just jumped into our portal. It's inside the transaction section. It's been created there. And that means that if it's an invoice, it's already on a report and available on the return for your returns processes. So there's not another lift of data required to get it into those different sections. You can see here that we also monitor your economic thresholds in terms of your understanding of your economic nexus and whatever jurisdictions you're selling into that you are not yet registered in, to give you a heads up as to whether or not you're creating liabilities in those jurisdictions and should potentially register. Okay. All of the settings that are used for the purposes of doing those calculations are in the settings section, and essentially they're parceled out into the different components of those settings inside of our system. So this is something that you don't set up inside of Acumatica. It's all done here. Primarily, you're setting up through a ClickBox orientation where it is that you have Nexus. In other words, where it is that you're registered, you're reporting and remitting. What you sell and buy is set up within the confines of Acumatica. Your locations are set up here. There's some components here for European Union. And then we have a whole section for custom and advanced rules where you can basically change the manner in which transactions function. Those transactions that you see are basically, they reside here. They reside here for the purposes of you being able to look at the details of those transactions on a line-by-line basis. So within Acumatica, you saw that we saw the details for the overall document. Inside of our interface, you'll see those details for each line item with regard to how we've calculated that line item or that overall document as well. All that information is then pushed into your reporting and your returns. In the returns, we fundamentally provide your returns on a specific timeline for every month. And our process is like a complete outsourcing of the returns because we have your data. We know exactly what belongs on the return for the time period that you're providing that return to the state or any other local or home rule jurisdiction. We ACH one single amount through an account with you, and then we do the actual submission of whatever the correct format is for every jurisdiction, and we do the treasury for those jurisdictions, and then provide you with an overall archive of everything that we did on your behalf. And then the very last part, realistically, is the exemptions component. And we're not going to get super deep into this because it's like another half an hour discussion if you want it to be. But essentially, this is where we added the customer, where we requested the exemption certificate from. When your client responds to that, their exemption certificate comes into this section. We auto-validate through a scan that we do of their documentation. We auto-validate the documentation with basically to understand that it's the correct document, all the information is there that's required. The only other further thing that you might have to do is to actually validate the taxpayer ID, right, which can also be done right from here. So very, very straightforward of way of making that occur. And then all of that information that resides in here is the information that you're looking at inside of Acumatica with regard to your overall client's exemption certificate status. Okay. And then essentially the very last part of that exemptions component is on the bottom of the page, and I'm just jumping between these here, was we have a resource section, and a lot of our clients now are really like referring to this. It's really important to them. We've added this because essentially we have all of the information. We just needed to structure it in a way that made sense for a lot of our clients. And so you can go through and get the tax answers you need with regard to specific documents. Like, is there a required renewal period for certificates in Alabama? And I can make this for, Arizona or whatever other jurisdiction I want. Basically, I get my tax answers on a state by state basis. And for a lot of customers, this kind of information is really important. Like, does that state require an in-state sales tax registration on the resale certificate in the state? No, it doesn't, right? In other words, Arizona will accept another state's exemption certificate if you're drop shipping into Arizona. So that kind of information is really key for a lot of clients to understand as they're using the system, and it's available directly inside of our portal as well. So with that, I'm going to jump into the presentation component here and just go to the last screen. And we'd be happy to continue any part of the conversation with you. You can download our guide directly with that QR code there. And we'd be happy if you scheduled a meeting with someone like me or one of our sales reps to go through anything that you'd like to see in further detail.